All right, Leadership to Wealth podcast. Today we have on the show an active speaker, public speaker. He is an author. He has also had his own TV show, long running. Now, our speaker today, he actually got into real estate back in 1989, and he has been in all facets of real estate, including development, including construction, including private lending. He's also a licensed realtor and a licensed mortgage broker. He has taught and helped people in the real estate industry for many years. Now, what many people may not know is prior to that, our guest today actually had dreams of being a fighter pilot, which he ended up leaving for the music industry, only to find his passion moving on in real estate. And today, guys, I want to introduce to you a rock star, a real estate man, and someone who is real to the core. I'd like to introduce today our guest, Mark Vasilius. So I've just said all these wonderful things about how you've been in the industry for so long,
right?
and forgotten more things than most people will ever learn. And
I'd like to think that, Neil, but we're just continuing our conversation we had, like I guess it was last week. Yeah. And if there's one thing I can say is that the more I know, the more I realize I don't know. And I can relate that to, for example, in my music. I was a musician, started off as a musician, wanting to be, big rock guy, and I practiced hours, lessons and the whole thing. And I thought I was good. I played in some good bands. I toured. I did a lot of stuff. But I got to tell you, as I got older, I started meeting jazz guys, and so I was humbled. That's the first thing that, we could talk about forever on, is being humbled. And there's nothing more life changing than being humbled and accepting that humility. So I've circled back and actually started recording again after having left music for about 20 years. Wow. And I'm just blown away at what a lousy musician I really am. I like what I'm playing, but I realize when I really listen to it, I go, would I listen to this? Would I buy this? And I'm going, I don't know. So I don't know if that's a great way to start this conversation about being humbled,
How did you get into music in the first place?
Oh, wow. I don't know. I mean, looking back, I really wanted to be a pilot. My brother and I just love flying. And so I joined the Air Cadets at 13, got the buzz haircut, marched up and down. And then for some reason, I got into music at high school. I really didn't think much of it. But I was taking drums, and he says, you're really good. You should take lessons. And I thought, oh, well, I guess so. So I took lessons, and it really took off. The Air Cadets found out, and then he said, Mark, we're pulling you out of the pilot program, and we're going to put you into the music program. And I said, no. And this is a cool thing, Neil. For the first time, I was 16 years old. I did whatever my parents told me. I was a good boy, the whole nine. At 16, I walked in and said, no, I don't want that. I joined 3 years ago to be a pilot. And I'll never, ever forget walking in there, scared to my mind, to the captain, right? Attention and all this kind of stuff. And I saying, no, I don't want to go to the music summer camp. I joined to be a pilot. And he says, you have to learn discipline. And I said, no, this is not the life I want. I couldn't believe it. I walked out at 16. And Neil, from that point, I grew my hair. My dad and I really didn't get along anymore. And I started becoming the guy that I am today, which is whatever that may be. But I do remember from 10 to 16, my dad and I, golden. From 16 to about 25, my dad and I, not so much, because I grew my hair and joined a rock band and, got into music. And but I was pursuing a passion, which really, Neil, I don't want to keep talking, but that is the key to life, is following your passions, for sure. I don't know if you would agree with that, but it started there, realizing that. So
Oh my goodness, Mark. So
I don't know.
Not Bruce Springsteen, Brian Adams, Summer of '69.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember hearing that song and immediately wanting to be in a garage band. And of course, I lived in an apartment building at the time, so I was like, I'm not sure how we're going to do this because we don't have a garage. But you're just talking about passion, right? And
Right.
and there's just something that hits. And I mean, music is there's something about music anyways. I mean, it soothes the savage soul, right? There's something to it that it just speaks in ways that we don't always have words for. And so
For sure.
I can completely get that passion. What's really interesting about the story that you just shared is how ready you were to go be the rebel fighter pilot, and then how that all flipped on its head, and you ended up becoming the rebel, band member.
You know, Neil, I certainly, I know, I want to relate it to what you talked about at the beginning is for people listening, what added value can I give someone listening? And I'm trying to connect that dot, and I'm realizing that my love for music as much, so just quickly, I stayed in the music business up until I was 40 years old. And that's when I got into real estate. I made a big change. But I want to connect that story about passion to my greatest real estate deals were related to my passion for music. It's like let me connect two dots.
Yeah.
I have other passions. I have passions for sailing. I have passion for my faith. I love God, and I'm a church going guy. But I have three things I say. There's only three things I can sell. I can sell sailing, I can sell music, and I can sell real estate. The fourth thing is, of course, I could sell the Bible, but that's not my call. So I believe that we only can be good at so many things. And so I became, I believe I became an okay musician. I got my head into real estate, and I got my head into sailing and cycling and stuff. But getting back to that, so I was into sailing, and then lo and behold, someone liked my boat, and we started talking, and he ends up being the number one designer in Toronto. I don't know if you remember a place called Toby's Good Eats. It was a hamburger joint, and it won an award for the best design. So you know how you walk into, let's say, Jack Astor's, and you have the brick wall and all these pictures? This guy, Peter Cotton from Sunburst Design in 1975, won all kinds of awards because he started that trend. That's how old I am. Yes, I know. Anyways, lo and behold, he has a sailboat, and I didn't know who he was. Make a long story short, he connects me to my very first real estate people because he's in construction. So because of our connection about music, he was a huge music guy. He loved and sailing. We became good friends. So it was nothing related to work. That's my first story about passion. The second one is with Chuck Mady. So I was already in real estate. I was living in Barrie, and somehow this guy called me, and he had I had to know who I was meeting. He says, "Mark, can I come up and meet you? I got a couple projects." And I thought, yeah, I had 80 apartments at the time, very busy. And I thought it was just I didn't even Google him, which, by the way, everyone should do before every single meeting is Google the guy you're meeting. Anyways, get in the car, and he starts playing music. And I said, "Oh, that's Steve, Steely Dan, and the drummer is Steve Gadd. And, during that solo he did." And he goes, "Wow, you know a lot about music." And I went, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, let me tell you, I love the whole trip. We talked music, and we went for a drive. I was so engrossed by our music conversation. We end up at a site, and he says, 'What do you think of this?' I go, 'Oh, what are we doing here?' And he goes, 'Oh, I'm just, showing you a site. What do you think?' And I said, 'Well, I think this, I think that.'" We come back. We talked music the whole time, Neil. He hired me as his VP. You know why? Because he said that the real estate thing, no question. He said it was my passion for music. I don't know how that worked. Anyways, him and I are lifelong friends, just to be clear. So there's a story about my love for music relating. And because of that, Neil, becoming the VP of development, I was into the rental space. And you and I had talked about that, about how real estate goes into cycles.
Yeah.
And that learning the different cycles. So I'm now getting much more involved in development and change of use as opposed to buying cash flow properties. I learned that with Chuck. So I
Okay,
know that's a
wait.
long. I know that's a long story, bro. But
No. It's perfect. I got to ask the question: why do you think there was that connection there? That he went from your passion for music to, hey, I want to bring you
well,
in on
okay,
this real
yeah,
estate side.
I don't know. I mean, I know that knowing his character, he cut through the crap. And let's face it, most developers and you would agree, successful entrepreneurs, they just cut through the crap. And the more confidence you get in life, the more you have an ability to cut to the chase and say, here's what we're really talking about. Let's cut the crap. I would have to assume that he saw that how truthful I was about my music, and I told him all about that. I actually didn't know I was being interviewed at the time. He was interviewing me. He didn't even tell me, but he offered me a job afterwards. And I said, "But Chuck, we hardly talked anything." He goes, "Mark, I don't have to. I already know your resume. Someone had already said, hey, call this guy Mark and Barry. He knows this." He says, I just wanted to see what kind of person you were. And I don't know about you, but you can tell a lot by having a person talk about their passion. And I guess we'll circle back to that is, the passion, a passion tells you a lot, right? About who the person you're dealing with. And if they're truthful, you'll know if someone is passionate or if he's, trying to jerk your chain. So,
Yeah, no, that's really interesting because I think we've probably both run into many people when you're talking to them and there isn't a passion for I don't know, anything, right? And that leaves you with sort of a sour taste in your mouth. Okay, it is what it is for them. That's great, but I can see how he was just enamored by the what's the word, ferocity of that conversation, right? Because when you're really engaging, right, that's in this business, you want to be able to enjoy the people that you're going to spend time with, right?
Exactly, for sure. You want to be surrounded by people you like being surrounded with, for sure.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let me just kind of jump to a question about that. Your grandmother told you to get into real estate.
Correct. Yeah. So I know we talked, but so briefly, yeah, she came here. She was able to buy a townhouse right at the corner, just off the corner of Bathurst and Queen. And it was a townhouse, and then she rented rooms. It had 6 bedrooms. And so she rented these rooms, and that's how she lived till 87, never walked into a thing. She just rented rooms to the people. And as you can imagine, but somehow she managed. And so she told me, she said, when you're younger, she said, get into real estate. And, when you're 19, 20, no one else in my family was doing it, to be honest. No one else. My dad was, I'll say it, my dad was a union man. I'm not a union man. I believe in, you work hard, you get paid hard. I had opportunities to be in a great union. I was a conductor on the railway. And when I saw much older guys, I was 20 at the time, and I saw how bitter they were, I realized that could be me 40 years from now, meaning that, they treat us wrong. They're this, they're that. And so I looked at that and I said, is that the kind of person I want to be? And again, bro, no one told me to ask those questions, but again, circling to helping people say, look at a guy that's been in the industry you're thinking of, and is he the type of person you want to be? Does he live the life that you want? And then follow that path. And so I saw these union guys, and all they were was pissed off. They were upset all the time, made a lot of money, but and I said, I don't want to be like that. And that's when I quit. And my father was totally against it. Again, as I mentioned earlier, my dad and I butted heads. So he was dead set against it. And I said, Dad, I don't want to be in a union. He goes, you don't know, they'll take care of you. They'll give you this and they'll do that. And I go, yeah, but Dad, if I'm unhappy, it doesn't matter. And that was a real tough moment for sure.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So you went from going to be a fighter pilot to going over
that
long haired,
great, by the way.
Yeah. From there to getting into music, getting into band, all that stuff, almost going down the road of being a union man. and just,
Right.
but
All
just
the different
looking down,
jobs. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, looking down the road and going, this is not how I want to spend
Right.
my life.
Yeah.
And then you continued down music at that point.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah.
I believed in it. And I actually worked for a big company. It was a company called Ericsson, and Ericsson, for those that are into music, I mean, they supplied Kramer guitars, Pearl drums, Fostex, Korg pianos was my number one line. My license plate used to say the M1. Anyone who understands music will know that the M1 changed the music industry. Just listen to any 80s song that Madonna did, and it's the M1 doing all this background. So I was in charge of Ontario for selling that thing. And because of that, to be fair, I bought 2 rental properties I was 27 years old. I only bought rental properties because my grandmother said. My parents said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Look, I'm going to rent these out." I had no real plan in place. Let me just say, I didn't write my business plan that I'm following now until I was 40. I loved music, and I never had a business plan because I'll go back to what I said. I was so arrogant. I was so thinking, what do I need to? I know where I'm going. And now I look back, and I tell people, I say, what do you want to do when you get old? Well, I want to do this. Have you written it down? Well, no. And I said, well, then you don't have a plan at all, right? You want to be a millionaire. Show me how you want to be a millionaire. Put it in writing. And so when I bought the homes, it wasn't part of a plan, a big plan. It was just because someone told me to do it, which looking back is the wrong reason. If as you mentioned, we want to keep this thing focused on helping people figure out, where they want to go in terms of a leadership thing. The best thing you could ever do is really write down what it is that you want out of life. I mean, Zig Ziglar said people put more planning into the wedding than into their life, right? And if you just spent the same amount of time, right? So I don't know if that makes any sense, but are you having a heart attack there or what?
I have not heard that one from Zig Ziglar, but that is so amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. People put more time into their wedding than they do into their life.
Right.
And you are so right. Oh my goodness. Holy crow. And sorry, go ahead, please.
No, but I just want to say, it's coming from a place where I was arrogant, not arrogant in terms of, abusive, but just internally. When I look back at myself, I say, man, I did listen to people, but I keep saying I am more humbled now than when I was younger. And I look back and go, man, if I just would have been a little bit toned down what I thought I knew versus what I really know, I maybe would have been further ahead. So again, getting back to buying my first couple properties, going back to the music thing, that's how I cut my teeth in rental properties, is almost by accident. And then, of course, 1989 came. Now, Neil,
wait, don't go there just yet. I'm gonna write that down. 1989, but I gotta ask you a question.
Right.
So your grandmother said buy real estate.
Yeah.
You didn't know what you were doing. You were focused on music.
Correct. Exactly.
And actually, there's something I want to ask about that, but we'll get to that. So you go to get your first property. Like, how did that happen? Like, you don't have any mentors, do you, at this time?
No.
You don't know what you're doing. How in the world did you get your first property?
So I bought, because I thought it was a good deal. It was actually a semi. I was very fortunate that I bought a semi, and anyone out there looking to buy real estate, which you're probably watching, semis are great because semis always have a side door that takes you to the basement, which automatically creates a second unit apartment option. So whenever, and I didn't realize this, so now whenever I look at a property, always look at the interior layout and say, can I split this up? Not realizing that 90% of the semis built have a side door, right? You got the front door and then you got the side door for the basement. And that's how most semis are built. So I when I bought it, I didn't have a plan. 1989 came, and I don't know if you're aware, Neil, but 1989 was the last huge real estate crash. Interest rates were at 12%. like for anyone listening, it is absolutely possible to have you go into a bank and you sign a mortgage with the bank and you're saying your interest rate's 12% and you think that's normal. So mistake number one is I did not have a mentor saying, Mark, you may not want to buy now because real estate, the market was so peaked, interest rates were so high that it would come down, and anyone wise would absolutely say that now. There's a whole other conversation about interest rates where they're a true guide of where we are from our thing. So I bought, and then within 6 months, the housing market crashed. Everything crashed. I paid $185 for the property. By 1991, I went to get it appraised. It was worth $155. Now, from 185 to 155, it's not a lot, but when you look at it as a percentage, 25%. If it's like going from $1 million to 750, doesn't matter. It's a percentage. So I realized, oh my God, I can't sell it. So I rented out the basement. That's how I was forced into doing it. So it's hard to believe, but I rented out the basement, and that's how I cut my teeth on renting. Yeah.
I love that. I love that, Mark. Oh my goodness. That speaks volumes about so many different things. For starters, let's be honest, you didn't know fully what you were doing.
No, I didn't.
You went forward anyways.
For sure, because everybody was doing it, Neil. 12%, that's cheap. Some guys are saying, I got 15 at the CIBC. We're talking Schedule A banks, 12%, man.
Yeah. Well, come on. Number one lesson in any master class on the planet is gonna be take action. And you jumped in there and you took action.
I did.
You may not have had the full plan. You had makings of one, and maybe your grandmother had been the one that said, go do it. But you did it. Yeah. And the ride that you just went through, through that little piece, can you share any of that? Because
for sure.
You're not even, that's not even your focus yet, right?
You're still. I was still connecting the two. So I had this rental property, and I realized I'm living in the main floor. I'm a single guy, by the way. I didn't get married till I was 37. So I had 4 bedrooms up. I had 3 bedrooms down, and I built everything myself. Put the shower in the basement, and I rented it out to a family. And they had a young child and the sleepless nights, and so then I rented out a couple rooms to some friends. So the reality was, during that very difficult time, from 90 to about 97, 7 years, I was able to survive because I rented out the place I was living. It's that simple. I cut my teeth on having crappy roommates, having lousy tenants, having some good tenants. And then I did that. So and I was doing the music business at the time. I left, I got into sound engineering, and I started actually building my own speakers. I very, very much got into sound engineering, and worked with a partner that actually developed a distortionless speaker. We created a crossover. I don't know if anyone understands. So sound goes into a speaker and gets divided by the crossover, and the crossover sends the highs to the horn, the lows to the woofer, and things like that. Anyways, I thought I was, onto something, and I had 20 employees. I had a manufacturing facility right outside Toronto, working my butt off, building, and not really making money. Every time I had a piece of money, I had to buy new equipment. I bought CNC machines. WSIB was always on my case because of the sod. We were cutting wood, and oh my God, I had glue. Anyways, bro, I really got tired and frustrated, more frustrated with our governments on how they make Canadian manufacturing so difficult. And I'm sorry if I'm rambling, but this is part of the story of. I went to China. I was fortunate enough that I got married in '97, and my wife was working, if you believe it, for the government, and was the executive assistant for Jim Flaherty. And I was able to get on a trip for going to represent Ontario into China. Who, me? So I went with these guys, and I'm going to China. And Neil, I saw factories building speakers that, when you see, in a building that's so high, you sort of, that like the second floor, and then you look out and you can see the whole, the factory was so big, it was misty. I couldn't see the other end of the building. Like I was up on the side and I was looked down and I could see, okay, there are some saws. And so I'm thinking, and I asked him, how big was it? He goes, oh, it's only about a quarter mile. I said, this building is a quarter mile and you're building just speakers. It was, oh yeah. And they tried to convince me to move my manufacturing there. Neil, the lesson I'm saying is I got back and I got out of the speaker business. I got out of the music business because I saw, how am I going to compete? They were building stuff there so cheap. This was 2002 that when I came back, I said, guys, it's only a matter of time before someone with a lot of money is going to go over, buy 16 container loads and flood the market. And that's exactly if anyone's in the music business, convince me if I'm wrong, but you look at the speaker and a lot of the stuff in the music industry comes from China. So I got out, and that's how I ended up there and got married. And then so when I got out, interject if you want, but I'm just going on and on because why not, right? Hopefully people watching can pick up on something and learn. And I'm just trying.
Mark, I'll stop you when you go up. When you go up, okay. Don't worry, keep going.
So I then looked at this property, and it was on Bluegrass Boulevard. If anyone knows Richmond Hill, it was Bluegrass Boulevard. I won't give the address, but Bluegrass. Anyone just off Taylor. So I looked and said, in my life, what is the only thing that I didn't make money in? I paid the bills, but I made money in real estate. So I talked to my wife, and I said, I think I have to make a career change. What are you going to do? I'm 42. I just had my second son, we're going to get into that. And I'm going, what do I do? I don't know. So I looked at real estate, and what the biggest motivator, if this helps, Neil, the biggest motivator, I was sick of what the WSIB was doing to me. I was sick of paying all these employees. Not the employees didn't deserve it. It's just all of running the company and all the machinery. I said, how can I make the same amount of money with less work? I don't know how. If there's anything I can tell anybody, figure out a business where you don't have to work that hard and you make tons of money. But I love physical work. I was a landscaper, and I built all these apart. I love hard work, but I didn't want to count on. Anyways, I looked and I said the only thing I made money on was this property. So I said I'm going to get into real estate. And at the time, the internet was barely alive, and I found the Real Estate Investment Network, and I joined that in 2004. And within 2 years, I had done 6 joint ventures and had 17 properties. Because bro, getting to the passion, I looked at what this was going, and I said, this is it. This I get it. These guys are making money passively. Yeah. And I picked everyone's brain. I connected with some of the smartest people in the world that I know. And and at 40, wrote my business plan. And because of the business plan, you mentioned Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, Earl Nightingale. These are the older guys. Yeah. You learn that these guys, they're saying stuff like Jim Rohn says, what book are you reading now so that in 5 years from now, he says, read the books that'll affect your life 5 years from now. Don't read, read one that's going to be. And I thought, wow, he's talking about planning and building and goal. And Zig Ziglar, huge into goal setting, huge. I mean, that guy so I bid on that one and said, okay, I'm going to write a business plan for my life. And I wrote everything down. The 5 things. You got your academic, your spiritual, your financial, your family and social, and then of course your academic. And so, what are your goals in all those areas? And then through that, what comes out, I can go through it. By the way, I had a whole website called The 6 Steps to Success. And if you read my book, I actually have a printout of it. I think right here, bro, look at this, bro. There it is. There, 6 Steps to Success. So it's an Excel spreadsheet of where you line up all your goals and you spit out your goals. So and in this book, as I say, don't talk to me real estate unless you have goals, unless you figured out what you want. Otherwise, you're just going to waste my time. So if there is a piece of advice, if you want to talk to someone that's done something, go to him with a plan, and boom, he's going to respect you, right? How many times someone come up to you, I want to invest in real estate, and say, well, what do you want to do? Well, I don't know. I just heard it's a good thing to do. Don't waste my time. So that's how I started in real estate. I don't know if that makes any sense, but.
Woo! Okay, so hang on a second. All right, you just took me on a bit of a whirlwind there. It's a beautiful
and I don't
story.
want to keep talking. Like I know I'm rambling, bro. I'm rambling and blah, and I'm trying to stay focused on what you said, which is helping anyone watching. If I can be of any help, is really what I want. Because what's his name? Stephen Covey says, abundance mentality or scarcity. I've learned abundance mentality is the world I want to live in. If anyone succeeds because of me, that's amazing. That's how the world I want to live in.
Mark, tell me a little bit about those years, those 7 years when, your property isn't worth, it's somewhere around 75% of what you bought it for.
That's right.
And you're trying to put people in there and you're thinking, what did I do? I'm actually passionate about music, but somehow I'm now stuck in this deal.
Right. And it wasn't it was a semi, it wasn't that impressive of a home. I did all the work, bro, in 7 years, roofs, windows. I mean, I did all the work myself just because I was built that way. And the funny thing was I got married in 97. So I had the home for 7 years. And, when I sold it for 192. I paid 185 in 1989, sold it for 192. 10 years later. So I had only made 3,000. But this is one of the motivators, is in that time, my tenants, not realizing how it works, my mortgage ended up only being 92,000. So I had made money. So I was able to sell the property almost for what I paid for it 10 years later and had $100,000 to put towards another home. Because no one explained to me, have tenants pay the rent down for you. And again, that's the passive income. That's something that I just want to encourage everybody. How do you create passive income? So
what were you thinking about your grandmother during those years as you were dying?
Well, she was too much of a humble woman to do anything but it's hard to explain, Neil. I mean, she rarely spoke. I mean, Christmas dinners, everyone's yapping, and there's my little old, she doesn't say anything. And then people would, and we had, and I don't know about your family, 25 around the dinner. We're European, loud, eating food. And then we're talking about the world events, and we're opinionated. You don't know. And then someone says, hey, Grandma, what do you say? And she goes, it's all just talk. And I thought, God, there's another wise saying. We're all trying to force, when you're young, I think you're wrong. And then it was fun. It was all in good. But, she says, she was trying to say, why bother? You guys are just throwing off. And that's the way she was built. She was a woman of action. That's for sure. A woman of action. So during those tough times, I couldn't say that I was, what would my grandmother do? Because I was just trying to survive. My music business, as I mentioned, I just paid the bills. Loved it. Met so many wonderful people in the music industry to this day, but really did not make money at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So you get through these difficult years and then you stumble upon all this equity that you now have in this property. Yeah. Are you realizing that as the years are going on? Are you seeing this?
No, because again,
you're focused on music.
Right. And the thing, Neil, is I didn't have a mentor. I didn't, one of the first things I learned when I joined, a group, so to speak, an investment group, is find a mentor. No one talked like this. Zig Ziglar talked like that. Earl. And here I was 42. And again, I go back to the fact that I was so arrogant. I thought, I'm a good drummer. I know what I'm doing. I'm smart. I have this. Not realizing that there's a lot smarter people out there that if I would have had, and to be fair, I had one guy in university. So I was, by the way, I could go on. I left home at 18 on a motorcycle, lived in Florida, worked on a cruise ship. Bro, there's all kinds of stuff in there. I came back, went to university. Lo and behold, a new neighbor moved in. So I was gone for 2 years. I came back at 20, started university. And the reason we're going back to the mentor, I want to explain a mentor. Someone that I realized, holy crap, this guy knows what he's doing. 20, arrogant, whatever. I know lots. I know music. I go back to university. My neighbor is a fellow named Frank Cosentino. Google him. Frank Cosentino was the quarterback for the Hamilton Tiger Cats that won the Grey Cup. He ends up being a professor at York University. He ends up being a phys ed and having his PhD in business. When I met him, he crossed the fence. Hey, how you doing? Frank, how you doing? He has a son my age, by the way, Tony Cosentino, to this day, a good friend. Anyways, I go to York. I'm arrogant. He says, hey, Mark, I see him in the hallways. He goes, you want to play a game of squash? And I'm thinking, he's 50. What does he know? I said, sure, I'll play you. I couldn't even reach the ball. He was so good. And, he wasn't trying to impress. He was just saying, this is how you play squash. I'm like, holy crap. And then, I started, here he was, the football coach, this, and I'm going, wow, this guy's a big man on campus. And I went, whoa. And then, because he's my neighbor, I went to him and he came in, barbecues, and I said, how's school going? Because I didn't take any of his courses. I said, I don't know, I just can't seem to get it together. And he goes, when you write an essay, let me read it for you. Okay. So he read, and Neil, no joke, he was so kind. He said, Mark, what are you trying to say in this essay? And I said, well, I'm trying to say blah, blah, blah. And he goes, well, why didn't you write that? Why are you trying to impress me with big words? And I said, because it's university. And I went, no. You missed the point. The point is you want to communicate something clearly. Use simple language and just write exactly what you're saying. And that's communication. I went from a C to an A plus. Bro, by the third year, I was an A student at York. I never got more than C's in my whole life because I don't know. So he said to me, and he guided me. And it's one of the first men, my father for sure. And there was this other fellow that I met, but for sure from a really, he blew me away, was Frank Cosentino. Humbled me in so many areas, but also was a mentor. He said, Mark, focus. Your energy and all this, and you can imagine, and blah, blah, I gotta do this, I gotta do that, arrogant. And he's saying, just focus. And he says, you're gonna become like a flower. And maybe one day he'll watch this, and it's a joke him and I have. And I said, Frank, I'm in bloom right now, man. I'm blooming. And anyways, he's still alive. He's actually 91, lives in Eganville. And he writes, he's an author. Google, I'm telling you guys, Google him. He writes all about sports, guys. He's published 13, 14 books, I think. So that was my very first mentor. I wish he would have said, Mark, get mentors. He did, though, very specifically try to guide me because he saw, I was like going here, talking about this, doing that. And he says, focus. And look, sorry,
Mark, I got to ask you something about that because you and I know the power of mentorship, of having someone that's able to guide you.
For sure.
But what most of us are afraid of, what most people are afraid of is just having the person that's telling you what to do. And you never know. I don't know if people know how to tell the difference. And I'm not sure if we even knew how to tell the difference at that stage. It just kind of happened at the right point in time. Now, yeah. I think you and I could probably talk about how we choose a little bit more. But I think there's so much fear around, how do I tell the difference between a mentor and someone who's just loudmouth or something, or just wants to tell me what to do?
Right.
Someone's trying to control my life, because that person probably sounds a whole lot like my dad or mom.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And that's an excellent point. My father, for sure, obviously influenced work ethic, influenced me probably is the greatest mentor, and I think most of our fathers are. But it's these outside people that sort of pinpoint us. And so, for me, it was more just, that you're 18 years old and you think you know everything, preventing me from listening to someone who has real abilities. And that's the first thing. And the second thing is thinking that why would this guy that has everything, smart, want to help me? And I'm, like I mentioned, I'm 61. And if anyone comes to me and says, hey, Mark, I'm thinking of buying a property, whatever. And by the way, Neil, I just met a guy, watched your podcast, met with him on Tuesday, just 2 days ago, watched it, contacted me, and just wanted to say, hey, Mark, this is what I'm thinking of doing. I want to talk real estate. We met at the Tim Hortons, and he's a great guy. Just so right on. That's exactly what. And he says, I really liked what you talked about. And I said, man. And so getting to that is I want to say that it's a compliment for anyone to come and say, I like what you said. Can you help me? And I go, of course I'll help you. Because you, Neil, and I both know as businessmen, we don't know where that person's going to be. What if that person ends up making millions and whatever? So, look, I'm talking about Frank Cosentino. I'm talking about Chuck Mady. I'm talking about people that influenced my life. These guys are still alive. And, they're well retired. But imagine, what if someone contacts me and says, I want to do business with you? I'm saying they're great people. They're great, influential people. Yeah. And that's, I don't know if that helps, but you're talking about breaking through the mentorship barrier. Yeah. I would say the first thing anyone's got to realize, it's a compliment. You're paying someone a compliment. Yeah. And I think that's a great thing to do.
You and I know something. I'm going to say it this way. You and I know about time in the desert.
Great way to put it. Yes.
Right. Where you're wandering and you're trying to figure this thing out. And sometimes you might even be there with some other people and they have no idea what they're doing out there either. Mm. But then when you actually, great way to bring Moses into it, all of a sudden, when you bring someone that actually knows a way through it, it's like a drink of cool water. And Can you say something about what it's like to be lonely in a space?
Well, that's I'm laughing because I had a TV show at one time. And I said to a couple of people, I don't want to hear your success stories. I want to hear the struggles, because it's during the struggle that you really learn the most. And it's during the struggle that's when people really need. Like when you're success and you got money, you kind of think, I don't need. But when you're going through a hard time, that's when you really, really need someone to lean on. That's when you really, really need that mentorship. And so, I've been through several, extremely difficult things, and I don't want to go into too many details, but I'm divorced. I'll use that, and I it was not something that I'm proud of. It is what it is. That was the most difficult time in my life, and I'll never forget, Neil, the day it happened, and I had to do a show that night, and I swear to you, Neil, it was a live TV show. It was in Newmarket, Rogers TV, and I had a guest, and Mark, what do I do? And I closed my eyes, I put my head down and said, this is the worst. I couldn't even think, because I just wanted to walk off. I said, I've got to pretend to be interested. I got to pretend. And the last thing, I was on the verge of tears, like everything I stood for, family, strength, like the idea of raising a family and all of that's extremely important to me, bro. Very important. And it was shattered. Everything I had lived for. I was raised, strong Catholic, the whole thing. And I loved it all. I truly, truly did, Neil. And to have this happen, and then the reason why I'm mentioning it is I just put my head down. I prayed. I said, get me through this next hour, because I had to, and I heard in my headphone, okay, you're on in 3, 2, 1. And I went, hey, welcome to another episode. And I honestly, that memory is so vivid. I remember the lights. I remember putting my head down and this person was going, Mark, what do I say? And I said, hold it. I just got to take a breather. So it's not really, I know I'm not relating how I got through it, but I'm trying to explain that there are moments in life where you're alone, you're truly alone, and you have to, God, I hate to use the word fake it till you make it, but there is some truth to that, where you have to put your head down. And I honestly don't know how I got through some of the things I got through. No joke, no joke.
Yeah.
I started, you know, if you want to talk about the desert, I started a company called Valor Capital. And at the time, I literally got divorced, and here I was starting a business. Had to drive to Burlington. I lived in King City. No money, you know, just, bro. I look back and go, how did I get through it? You work your butt off. That's one thing. Working very hard gets you through difficulties. You know, I don't know how you want to talk about the difficulties, but I look back now and just, I don't know how I got through it. I'll be serious. I don't know how I got through it. That was the most difficult time.
Yeah. Mark, I really appreciate what you're sharing and what you're giving right now, because you're right. The good times, the successes are real easy to talk about.
For sure.
But for anyone that's actually been through it or had any success, what you really know and you really remember is what you had to get through to get there. Yeah. Right. And so I really appreciate what you're creating here in terms of helping us understand the battle in behind, because I think a lot of people see the gold and they're excited about that, and they don't understand that you're going to have to dig through a whole bunch of dirt to get there. And so,
like a lot of people say, you know, to that, you know, the harder I work, the luckier I get. Meaning that they say, "Oh, you're just lucky. You just bought that property." I said, "No, you have no clue. There's so many things going on behind it. You know, like I always, if there's anything again I could say is, you got to give the 2.5-minute speech. My son wanted to be a movie guy. I said, "Okay, Miles, you're in an elevator with Steven Spielberg. You got 2 minutes. Tell me exactly what you'd say." And he goes, "What are you talking about?" I'm saying, because that's how prepared you need to be for the opportunity. Because then people are going to say, you were lucky. And no way were you just lucky. You were prepared for the guy that brought you whatever. But because how many, right? So be prepared with your business plan. Be prepared when that opportunity comes, because then you're going to get really lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. Then they'll call you an overnight success after.
That's right. And so all the struggles that, you know, you go through, all the internal personal stuff that you go through, they don't know how you got there, and they think, you were just like bull. I say that bull, bro.
You know, I've been in private lending for a number of years now, and I remember when you know, people were, including brokers, were trying to talk me out of it. They're like, "What are you doing that for?" Like, there's all this other stuff. Why are you trying to do that type of business? And then years later, those same individuals would come back around and say, "Wow, you know, I guess it was a really good idea that you got into it back then."
Yeah. You were lucky, Neil. Yeah.
Yeah. Meanwhile, if you had done any research, or you know, in all these different areas that we're talking about, if you do some research, if you put a plan together, you can see that there's not. I'm not that creative. I got to be honest. Like, as much as I enjoy the creative side of me, a lot of it is, if you just take the time to look ahead, look at the past, and then look ahead, you know, a lot of it can be figured out. But this element of tenacity that you're talking about, this element of being able to hold up under the fire, to be able to stay cool and to look cool and calm while everything is going crazy.
Yeah. Well, and again, that's why I brought up that TV show. There was a perfect example of, you know, looking like, hey, I'm into this, but oh my God, that's the last place in the world I wanted to be.
Yeah. And you know, something I think is important is that there's a lot of situations that you get into, and you get into them at one point, and once you've gone through it, it's a lot easier to deal. You don't have to fake it the next time around. And I think there's something to being an investor that those muscles get built through that fire, through that exercise, that a lot of people don't get. Because I've seen I saw a developer a few years back who had amassed millions of dollars in a very short period of time, in about a 5-year span.
Right.
And I looked at this individual on paper, and I can say this. I said, nope, something is wrong. I will not lend this person any money. And and the other person thought, well, why would you do that? And I said, why won't you do that? And I said, this person hasn't learned certain lessons that come through going through tough times. They haven't been through any of it.
Yeah.
And as it turned out, that developer almost totally died. They had to sell off most of their stuff because they hadn't learned some of those lessons along the way of what can happen when you don't get a permit, what can happen when and if they don't have the mentor in there to be able to walk them through, I think there's
for sure. Yeah. I mean, you're touching on the thing about risk, that weighing out the risk to the reward, and understanding those two things is the key to investing. Yeah. But I think only experience and maturity, having lived through a lot of different things, will tell you. It's like, buying at 12%. I had no one tell me, are you crazy? That's the highest interest rate we've seen in the history of Canada. I just went at it because no one, if someone, older would have said, that's very high. You better. I had no one. And so, it's true. As you get older, you become less risk oriented. You become risk averse. Yeah, and there's reasons for that. It's because you've seen failure. You've seen things go bad. And I mean, people who meet me now, they say, oh my God, are you ever a risk taker? And I said, you should have seen me when I was 20. Oh man, I jumped on a motorcycle and took off. I said, no, I'm going to find my riches. And, but I do that only, I'm trying to temper that because I've crashed. I've seen a crash in real estate. The 2008 scared the crap out of me. I had 17 properties. The market froze, and I made some changes thinking we're in for trouble. But as we know, the market just leveled off for about a year, and then it took off again. But having seen those things, it's scary. So right now, let's talk practical real estate stuff. So I'm seeing cap rates of 3.5%. I just saw a guy say, hey, there's a deal here at 3.5% cap rate. And I want to be the old guy and say thanks and say, you know what? That's stupid. That's unheard of. You should be buying when cap rates are at 8 and 10. In 2005, no one told me that I was at a great moment to buy real estate. Every property I looked at, Neil, was between 10, 12, 15% cap rates. And I bought whatever I could. So that's really, but if I had a mentor saying now's the time to buy, but looking back, was I lucky? I was involved in an investment group. I did have some people, and everyone was saying now is a good time to buy. And I do appreciate that. And I'm trying to tell people now, cash flow properties are brutally difficult to find right now. Not that real estate, you don't invest, you just have to look at other avenues. So I'm only being very specific. If there's any piece of advice, is don't buy a property with 3.5 cap rate. One mistake and you're losing money. So, you know what I mean in terms of, and yet, and I know, bro, there are people buying properties left, right, and center where it's 0 cap rate. The mortgage is going to be paid. What if the property goes down in value? That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that makes sense.
Forget about that. There are people right now that are buying that are losing money.
Yes.
And they're like, oh, okay. And there are people that are teaching this and saying you get a write-off because you're losing money. Oh, don't worry. You can put that against, your income. You can lose some money. But, appreciation is going to, right? You've heard this stuff. And, oh, my goodness.
So what do you say? So appreciation equals speculation. You don't know. So if you want to be a speculative investor, count on appreciation. I tell everybody in this, again, by the way, anyone watching, free book. It tells you whatever I'm talking about. It goes
where do they get the book, Mark? Where do they get your book?
You can email it to me. You can email me at, mark@coreadvisory.ca. I would love to send you the book. Again, it's self-published. It's not on Amazon. I just did it because I did have people say, oh, Mark, you should write a book. And I thought, you know what? I had a blog and I really just collected it all. It wasn't difficult. And I did have a great publisher, Wiley, publish it for me, and just friends. But it was just a thing to. It was another checkbox, right? It's cool. I did a TV show. I wrote a book. These are all cool things. But in it, I say very clearly, you only buy on cash flow. That should be your number one reason. Appreciation is in there. I'm not saying appreciation isn't part of life, but it shouldn't be the reason. So That's all I can say about that.
Oh, preach, brother, preach. I love what you're talking about.
Well, I got to be careful. I got to be careful what I say, because I run a company, Core Advisory, and we're buying. And when you look at my pro formas, I do not include appreciation. So I can only do deals because I have to preach. I have to do what I preach, which is I'm not buying on appreciation. I'm buying on cash flow. If I'm buying a cash flow property, and I haven't bought I am buying one. By the way, it's a long story, but I'm buying one and it cash flows. But it's it's north of Toronto. But yeah.
Okay, wait. Let me ask this question here, because you, as the owner of Core, or just
I'm a partners. Core Advisory is actually a partnership.
Okay.
And I own. I'm partners with Core Realty Partners is one division of Core Advisory. It is the development division. And as I mentioned earlier, we also set up a rent to own. And so I'm partners in all those companies. But I have partners, and get used to it. Real estate is always about partnerships. So,
absolutely. Okay, so let me ask the question, because you've had a number of companies. Mm-hmm. You've had a number of companies. So how in the, if I'm looking you up and I see, okay, he's got Core, but look at all these other companies. What does that mean? That means that those companies probably have all failed. Like, how in the world can I look at this guy and?
Well, I mean, Valor is still around. Valor Pro Funds, they're still around. You probably know, they're still around. I left and it was amicable. I'll just say it as that. My music company, the speakers I have are still around. Bro, no joke. Yesterday, a friend on Facebook sent me a picture on Facebook Marketplace. A pair of my speakers are for sale. I feel like buying them as antique sake, because I stopped building back in 2002. So, man, and I built the last series were amazing. You couldn't blow them up. You could drive the crap out of them, throw them. And anyways, I had to sell it. Anyway, that's a whole other story. So I never went bankrupt, never had a bankrupt company. But I'm saying straight up, certain companies did better than others. And even on my investments, every investment I've done, I've never lost. My investors haven't lost. Sometimes you didn't make as much, but I can honestly say that, so far so good. It's been good that way.
So now, having been through a number of up and downs through different companies, can you say something about that in terms of, like, what did you learn from going from company?
Great question. So if I'm saying life is about partnerships, I then realize that if you want to go into a business and you want to join partnerships, the thing called the shareholder agreement is the agreement that binds the corporation. I don't know for anyone. So if you want to buy a property and you're going to go into a partnership, the corporation owns the property. The shareholder agreement is the divorce agreement. So that's how I look at it. So before you buy the property, write your divorce agreement, which is a great way of planning to say, if what hits the fan, here's how we're going to divorce each other. And then you get, and it's believe me, those are difficult conversations. You're going with a partner. Well, what if you rip me off? And you're right. What if I do? What if this happens? What if you steal money? So you go through, and the shareholder agreement, if they're, again, having done a few of these, the lawyers have said, think of it as the divorce agreement. So if there's a piece of advice, working in partnerships, working in relationships, create a strong shareholder agreement that basically is your divorce agreement, and that way you can sleep at night. And you both agree. If we get a divorce, which is absolutely possible, it's all written there. Oh, I buy you out, shotgun agreement, whatever it is, no problem, see you bye. And that's how it's done. Like, don't be afraid don't be afraid to ask extremely difficult questions.
Yeah.
Like saying, what if the market collapses? What if, you're right, let's put that in there. What if the market collapses? Here's what you and I are going to do.
Yeah.
And that's
what, why is that important?
Because it happens. Because that kind of stuff happens. Not all of it happens, but let's face it, the golden times in a partnership is when you first meet. Oh man, aren't you great? Oh wow, what a great, you and I are going to make millions. Wow, oh yeah, we're going to work hard. And then it's all positive. It's all positive. And I'm going and saying, stop the positivity. Hire a good lawyer that asks you the very difficult questions, says, what if you hate the guy? What if he steals? What if he dies? What if the market collapses? What if this? What if he, oh my God, there's so many scenarios. Most in real estate, there's pretty standard joint venture agreements and shareholder agreements. It's your roles. You do this, I do that. Well, what if you don't do that? Well, then I do this, and that kind of thing.
Can you explain the difference between the two?
A joint venture agreement is so a corporation is a legal entity. A joint venture agreement may not be a legal entity, meaning that it's a trust agreement. So trust agreements can be anything where two people sign and say, I trust that your signature is good. That's a trust agreement. A corporation is a legal entity that pays taxes. So that's the way I've always been taught. It's like a person that has a number to it or a name. The shareholder agreement that gets attached to that corporation forms part of a legal entity. It may not necessarily be the joint venture agreement. So how I sometimes look at it is the joint venture agreement is almost the draft of a shareholder agreement. You can just survive on a joint venture agreement. In other words, you can both say both our names are going to be on the property, and the thing that brings us together is the joint venture agreement. Right. So it's not a registered agreement the way that a corporation is registered, right? A corporation is registered on title when you buy a property. Therefore, it's a shareholder. A joint venture agreement is not necessarily, however, you can register trust agreements. So just want to be clear that a joint venture agreement for me is like the preamble to a shareholder agreement. Right. If that helps. I don't know if that helps. But.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Thank you for putting that so clearly. I mean, honestly, that you're just teaching a masterclass right there. I'm continually talking with investors, as you are, and you realize how much is not out there in terms of people are going to people, they're paying for mentorship, they're paying for some of this stuff, and they're not getting simple information like you just laid out. Hey, what's the difference between a shareholder agreement and a joint venture agreement? What's the difference between a rent to own and a rental? Right.
And the importance of these documents legally is really what it comes down to. I mean, a handshake is still a fundamental of a good agreement. A handshake agreement, right? People say, well, I shook his hand. I know partnerships that have survived on handshake because there's trust. Yeah. I cannot say, and people have said this, any agreement is only written is only as good as the person behind it, is the signature behind it. Because you could sign an agreement and the next day you end up in court, and guess what? You go into court over a joint venture agreement, you're going to be years and years. You go into court. I've seen mortgages where the guy didn't pay it out. He was paid out. The amount sat in a judge for 4 years. Like, you can even still have all that. It's the person that signs it. That is true. And that's where, how do you describe trust, Neil, right? Like, how do you put trust in writing? That's really what in essence is you're putting trust in that person. And experience, I don't know how, there's a whole other conversation about trust, because we are trusting the people we're signing.
Yeah. Since you brought it up, I got to ask about that. Can you see, this is part of the world of this is leadership to wealth, and where we're talking about taking leadership of yourself, and that leads to wealth in finances, family, fitness, all of these areas. And trust, without a doubt, is at the core of that, of leadership. And so can you say a little bit more about that? Because I think a lot of people are scared when it comes to some of these areas. They're scared when it comes to marriage. They're scared when it comes to finances, because how do I know I can trust this person?
That's right, for sure. And that's where, the simplest answer is, well, you got to take a leap of faith, because you got to trust a person. And there is stories. I have stories about woman's intuition. So I remember going to meetings, and I remember hearing, growing up, wow, women's intuition. What the hell's that? Come on, they don't have intuition. I got to tell you, they do. I've been in parties, and the girl I was with or whatever, and they shake their hand, and I go, "What a great guy!" And she goes, "I don't know, Mark. There was something about him." And I'm going, "What are you talking about? He was great." They were right, and I got to tell you, meaning that the person did end up, doing something nefarious. I do believe in women's intuition. It's I don't know how to put it, bro. I'm hoping there's women watching this, but saying I commend you for you can shake a guy's hand and know if he's telling the truth. It says, how do you do that? So trying to learn from that, circling back to the original question of trust, it does come down to that. And I guess your gut has to tell you, gosh, is this person? So let me, there is one piece of advice, again, being a leadership thing is, if someone is exposing themselves, their vulnerabilities, I tend to trust people that do that because most people want to hide and only show their strengths. It's the people that are so strong that they show their vulnerability. They show the mistakes. They talk about their failures.
Yeah.
Those to me are the people. Sorry, I didn't turn off my phone. Sorry, bro. That I would say, if you're asking a very pointed question, that would be an indicator for me saying, God, that person, he opened up. He told me something that, wow, he struggled with something. No one. So just to be clear, in business, one thing about being older and maturity has taught me is that everybody goes through crap. And if in a business meeting somehow, negative things come up, I have a tendency to trust that person because I'm going, wow, I find that someone who becomes vulnerable, humble, is usually a trustworthy person. I don't know how else to put it.
I love when people say, you know what, I don't know the answer to that. I'll get back to you. And they take note of it. It's like, okay, I would rather you say to me, you don't know, and you're going to get the answer rather than trying to BS it, trying to come up with, and you've watched people do this. Oh my goodness, you got me all excited. You've watched people do this, and they start making up stuff. You can tell they're doing a song and dance.
Right. They're trying to impress me. They're trying to sell me something. And there's no need to do that. That's,
and whatever was amazing prior to that point, if they had just been honest with you in that moment and said, I don't know, at that point, you're like, no, I don't know. If I can see this one, who knows how many other bodies are buried back there.
And let's circle this back all the way to the beginning about music, because I know our time is up. So here I was talking about music. In other words, I wasn't trying to impress him. I was just being myself. It's exactly what you just said, Neil. Just be yourself. And the guy hired me. And that, if there is ever a piece of advice, is don't try to impress someone, because especially an older person who's been around, and this whole thing about leadership and all that, is we've seen it all. If I can say one last thing, is I deal with investors all the time. And when I meet someone and they saying, and if within that first 5 minutes they say, I have a lot of money, they don't. If they come across dressed casual, shorts, t-shirt, and they're not trying to impress me, they do. That's, if there's, going back to the idea of trust, in other words, you don't have to impress people. You just be yourself. I know that's so boring, and that's so not, there's no lightning bolts, but for young people, everybody's trying to impress you. And I'm saying, I'm sorry, I'm not impressed. Like, I'm not impressed with your BMW. I'm not impressed with your Mercedes. Sorry. Just read what's his name's book on 85% of the people driving BMWs are 3 months away from bankruptcy. What's The Millionaire Next Door. Great book. He talks about who are the real millionaires in life. And I'm sidetracking. Sorry, I won't get into that. But read that book. It'll tell you who so anyways, I think our time's up, bro. We've been talking for an hour, man.
Mark, the rock star, real estate, and realness.
No.
Rockstar Real Estate and Realness with Mark Vasilius. Mark,
I
it has
appreciate it.
been a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with
And
all
before
of us.
I go, and you know, Neil, it was my pleasure. I got to tell you, you're easy to talk to. I said this after our first interview. I said, this guy Neil, he's a success. All he did was lift me up. All he did was make me look good, and that to me is a sign of success. So Neil, you don't even have to. I want to interview you for my show, for my upcoming things, because I can tell you're a success because you're really making me look good. And I tell you, I've been in an interview. You're nailing it. So I don't doubt, Neil, that you've got stories and that you're a success of your own. And so I got to just say thank you, man. You just keep it up.
Thanks, brother. We had a blast having you on the show today, and definitely looking forward to you and I connecting more.
Yeah, you're coming on mine. How's that?
And guys, if you want to check out Mark, you can, of course, go check him out at Core Advisory, and we're gonna have all of the links to find Mark on the show below. So, Mark, thank you so much for being on the show.
My pleasure, Neil. Great chatting with you.
All right, take care.